everyone, or afternoon, I suppose. Welcome back to Adobe Live. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and I hope you're all doing well. Long time no see. I feel like I was just live just a few moments ago. But let me know who you are, where you're tuning in from. Welcome back, everyone. Eric and Jofian and Jack and Sanji and Ariana and Anil. If I mispronounce anyone's name, I do apologize. Tim is in the house, Bohana, and everyone else joining me live this morning. This is my first Adobe XD Masterclass, where we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into Adobe XD, talking about some things like components and states, and every week is going to have a bit of a different theme. Oh, look at all the people coming in. We've got Kiki and Jason and Kara. Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to be here. So today's going to be about half an hour. Typically, the masterclasses are usually an hour, but we're kind of, relaxing this week. We had Paul Tranny this morning with his Photoshop Masterclass, Jason Levine with his Premiere Masterclass, and now I'm here with my XD Masterclass. And if anyone has questions throughout this thing, definitely throw them in the chat. I will be watching. So let me hop over to my screen right over here, and let's kind of talk about what we're going to be doing. Here's my Dribbble account. You don't have to worry about too much of this, but I'm going to be kind of showing you a little bit tips and tricks on how to create something like this, right? At Adobe Max, we created, or we released components and components, or we released component states. We had components for a while, I believe since May, but we released component states, which allows you to really take your components to new levels and create entire experiences all from a single artboard. And all the experiences, all the interactions that you see on this dribble shot are all done on one artboard. I'm going to be showing you how to do that in this about half an hour masterclass. So let's make rocket launch to space right, indeed. So let me go ahead and hop over to Adobe XD. And if anyone is joining me just kind of coming in, if you have questions throughout the stream, definitely let me know. So I have a bit of a bare bones view of this desktop application that we're working on, and this is a music application. And maybe in the hour-long streams, once we get to those, we'll really dive in and design something like this from scratch. But today we're about half an hour, 25 minutes, something like that. So we're gonna kind of take things simple. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you why components are necessary and why states are necessary and how they can really help take your projects to new levels. And hopefully some of you have already been using components and states. If you haven't, let me actually hop back over to Chrome. If you go to letsxd.com/states, I believe this link's over here, there. I've got a video on how states work. I also have a UI kit which contains 100 components and over 200 states you can download completely for free, and it really dives deep into what's possible with states. But let me hop back over to Adobe XD and let's start designing. So Bahan is saying, is there a possibility to download that tunes template? So not everything, but I do on that UI kit, this one here, there is part of that template. It's kind of a bare bones version of that template. I wasn't able to release some of the images that I use for copyright reasons, but you can download at least the structure of it. So we're gonna start by just, creating a button. And I'm gonna dive in here and I'm going to simply grab my rectangle tool and draw out a button just like this. Nothing too crazy, right? Let me zoom in here so we can really see what we're working with. And I may want to use the same color that I've been using here and down here. Now, if I hop over to my assets panel is looking kind of boring right now. I purposely left it blank because I want to show you the power of assets as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this layer here, this splash layer, which is using that specific pink or purple, whatever you want to call it, that I'm using throughout the desktop application. And I'm going to press the plus button right here beside colors. And if I zoom in, you can kind of see it right there. Boop, there we go. And then now I have that plus button. And thank you, Kara. She says the content in Let's XD is awesome. You are welcome. So I'm going to go ahead and just name this, let's say, highlight pink, right? And now what I can do is I can grab this button and simply click on that new highlight pink, and I'm able to use it pretty much anywhere I want. And you're going to see why this is so important in a second. I'm going to turn off border, and then maybe I'll just round this out completely. And Nick is saying Artina's switching over from Figma to XD because states are so powerful. That's great to hear, Nick. And obviously, Figma is a great application, but we're doing a lot with states, and release states at Adobe Max. And states in its current form is very much just the beginning. We're going to be releasing new triggers. We're going to be able, there's a lot. I don't want to spoil too much, but states is going to get even better, right? So we've got this button right here, and we might want to turn this into a download button. So I'm going to grab my text tool and simply type out download. I might want to change the color to white. Maybe I'll make this a little bit larger, just like that, right? Beautiful, perfect. And I'll change the font. I've been on a Poppins kick lately. I might want to center it, and maybe I'll change this to semi-bold. There we go. Erica's saying scroll trigger, maybe. Maybe at some point we'll do a scroll trigger. I would love to see that in Adobe XD. So we've got this button here. I may want to add one more thing. I may want to add a bit of an icon. And of course, I just showed you in the previous stream how you can grab icons using plugins. I also have a plugin manager I use called Nucleo. And Joe is saying time states. That would be really cool too. And let's go ahead and just type in download. And we've got this icon right here. I can drag this in. Whoops. I missed. Drag it in, right? Oh, that's not what I wanted. I think I broke everything. Drag it into Adobe XD. Let me make sure I have the right icon. Is this the one that I need? Oops, I'm on the wrong file. Yes, this should be the one. All right. Drag it over here. Where is it? Where did it go? I put it in the wrong layer. Here we go. There we go. So we've got this download icon, and it is vector, so I might want to change the color to white. Maybe make this a little bit smaller, move this over, and now we've got this icon that kind of accompanies our download, right? So here we go. We've got our download button pretty much set up. And of course, we might want to use this throughout our document, want to make some changes depending on the situation. So we'll want to turn this into a component. And if you're brand new to Adobe XD, components really allow you to save commonly used elements for future use and also to make sure that they stay up to date across your entire document. So what I'm going to make sure to do is select all the elements that make up this specific button. And I do have them all selected. You can do that in your layers panel. You can also hold down your shift key and make sure to select all those. And then there's a few ways. So Pedro's asking, why does that happen, Howard? So basically what was happening there is I was dragging an icon or an image into XD, and it was using some of the shapes that were on this document because I was zoomed in a lot. They were basically using them as masks, so that icon was being masked inside that shape. I have spoken to the team about that, and it sounds like maybe at some point in the future we'll allow you guys to hold down a shortcut key to avoid doing that. But for now, if you just drop it into an empty space on the canvas, it'll help you. You can actually kind of see it right here. So let me go ahead and delete that. Yeah, so that's the way it works right now, but hopefully in the future that will change. All right, so we've got all the elements selected, and I want to turn this into a component. And the way you can do that, you can right click, you can make component, you can use Command and Control K, or you also have over here to the right, a new component section within the properties inspector. And if you press on that, boop, there we go. We now have our default state. And you can go back to your assets panel if you wanted to. You can go ahead and name this. I'm gonna name this download button, just like that. And now one of the benefits is that you can very easily drag out additional buttons across this artboard, across many other artboards. It doesn't matter what it is. And if you edit the master component, which is this one right here, it's essentially going to keep everything up to date, right? Beautiful. So let me go ahead and backtrack, and let me really dive into why this is so important and how you can use states to better your projects. Kiki's saying you can copy and paste from Nucleo too. I think you can. I'm just so used to dragging and dropping, but I do believe you can copy and paste. So we've got this button right here, right? And we may want to create a few different versions. One, we may want to create a hover state. Yes, hover is finally in Adobe XD. So what I'm going to do is over here to the right, we've got our default state, and there's a plus button now beside default state. And if I press that, we can create a new state. We can also create a hover state. And you're noticing that if I really zoom in, there's a lovely little lightning icon beside hover state. And this lets you know that when you create a hover state from over there to the right, it'll automatically wire it up in the background. So you don't have to worry about going into prototype mode and doing your thing. It'll just do it for you. So I'm gonna go ahead and choose hover state. I can name it if I want to, but hover state's a pretty good name. And it is the active state right now. It is highlighted in blue. So basically any changes I make to this hover state is going to apply to the hover effect. So let me go ahead and maybe I'll select the background just like this. I'll select the little container and I'll maybe increase the brightness just a touch. And maybe I'll dive in here to the icon. I'll select these guys here, move them up a few pixels, move the bottom one down a few pixels, and there we go. So now that we've created our hover state, it's that simple, right? And now I can toggle back and forth between our default state and our hover state. And like I mentioned, when you do select and create a new hover state, it automatically wires it up. So what I can do is press the play button at the top, and all I have to do now is hover, and it animates beautifully. Auto animate is default for hover states, and there we go. So just with one artboard, you can create a very cool hover effect, right? But of course, it gets a lot deeper when you're talking about states. You may want a situation where you want to use the same component to create a button, but you may want an outlined version, for example. And in the past, what you'd have to do is you can, duplicate this over and make some changes to it. But really, when you start making a lot of changes to your components, it kind of breaks. It breaks from the master component, and it's very difficult to update the instances across multiple artboards of a master component. But with states, it's a lot easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the plus button one more time at the top to create a new state, and I'm just going to call this outlined. And again, I do have this state active right now, so I can go ahead and make some changes. So maybe for this particular button, I don't need this icon. I'm going to get rid of that. Maybe I'll change this to play now. Make sure this is centered. I'll select the background. I might want to get rid of the fill completely, change the border, and make it, whoops, 12 is way too much. Something about that, right? Perfect. And I might also want to just make this a little bit smaller. There we go. Make sure everything's centered. Perfect. So now I can toggle back and forth between all my different states. But one of the big benefits is that I can just duplicate this over and just choose the state that best fits that specific situation. So now I have both of these buttons on my document, right? But they all belong to the same master component. And here's why that's so important. And here's what the big benefit is of this, right? If I had at some point, multiple versions of this button all around my artboards, and it doesn't have to be just on this artboard, it can be on all the different artboards on your project. And when you really dive into things, you can have this linked to a document, so you can also have these across multiple documents. In the past, updating all of these instances of this master component at once was pretty much impossible. But what you're able to do now is go to, let's say you wanted to change the rounded corners on just this button, right? Or you wanted to change something on this button, maybe the size of it. If you right click, edit master component, it's going to take you to the master component, which is indicated by a little lovely diamond icon at the top left. I can switch over to my outline button. And now, because I'm on the outline state of the master component, I can start making changes. So I can dive in here, I can move this around, I can make this a little bit longer if I wanted to, right? I can move this just like that. I can add an icon. So if I did go back to Nucleo and I grabbed a play button, play, I can't spell today. I can never spell. I can just copy this. I believe someone just mentioned copying works, and it does, look at that. So I can pop this in here, change the color to white, and you're noticing it's updating across all of the different instances where I'm using that particular state, right? So I can just do that, make sure everything's lined up really nicely, and then I can just go back to my default state. And now, obviously these wouldn't be around here, but you did notice that they updated really nicely. But what's even cooler is it still maintains that link back to the styling of the master component, which is hard to wrap your mind around. But if I wanted to make sure that the rounded corners or the corners were the same across all of my different buttons, including my states, I can go to my master component, dive in here, and just make changes. And now, all of a sudden, you're noticing that the button updates, even on the states that have been overridden, right, or updated. Now, of course, if I did go to this particular state and change the rounded corners manually, it will not change, because I basically told XD that I need a manual override on that particular instance, so it will not affect when I do change the master component. But of course, you know, if you needed to, you can do that. So that's definitely one of the biggest benefits of using states and components in Adobe XD is, you know, saving space and saving, you don't have to have multiple artboards for single interactions. And to really show you, you know, how that works and what the benefit is, let's go ahead and create something fancy. We have got this user icon over here to the left, right? And we may want to create an expanded view for maybe settings or something to that extent. So what I'm gonna do, let me just make sure I've got everything here set up. There we go. Ben says, we'll have a masterclass on using complex design systems. For example, show your process on how you would use States UI. Yeah, probably. I'm gonna be doing a lot of these masterclasses, I think 3 a month, and design systems is definitely something I wanna get into, especially when you're talking about linking and using material design and things like that. So yeah, definitely stay tuned and come back. I think the first 3 Fridays of every month, I'm gonna be doing a masterclass, and then the last Friday, the XD team is going to be live at the same time, talking about their process. They're going to be interviewing designers and people on the team, showing off new features. It's going to be pretty cool. So what we're going to do now is we've got this user profile, right? And we might want to turn this into a component to create a state that when you tap on it, it reveals settings or reveals something, right? So I've got all these elements created, and I'm going to go ahead and let me just open this up. All right, I'm going to go ahead and press the plus button beside component. That's my default state. Now I may want another state so that when someone taps on it, they'll be able to expand that section. I'm going to press the plus button and go ahead and create a new state just like that. And I'll name this expanded. Boom, perfect. So now that the expanded state has been created and selected, what I want to do is start designing that expanded view. Now I do have this drop down right here, right? Now, I did cheat a little bit, it's already there, but let's go ahead and actually delete it. Just so I can kind of show you, we do have some time. I want to make sure I delete it from both states. I'm in my expanded state. There we go. So let's go ahead and create it from scratch, shall we? Let's check for questions, no questions yet. All right. So we're inside, and you have to make sure that you are inside the component and you have the state selected in order to make some changes. So I am inside that state. I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and I'm simply going to draw out that area. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter if it's bigger than the original state and component. The bounds will expand really nicely. I'll round out the corners just a touch. Maybe I'll change the background to slightly darker, not too dark, but a little bit darker, turn off the border, or maybe I'll just, you know, drop the color a little bit, add a little bit of a drop shadow. Everyone loves a good drop shadow, right? But you don't want to go too crazy with your drop shadow. Very subtle, just like that, right? And then maybe on the inside, we might want possibly a few switches. So what I'm gonna do is type out, let's say private, for example. And essentially, you know, if you've used Spotify before, they have the ability to turn on private listening, so you don't really broadcast to your friends what you're all listening to. Some people like their privacy. I get it. Maybe I'll change this to medium, make it a little bit larger. And then maybe over to the right, we might want a switch. So let me very quickly create a switch. I'm gonna grab my rectangle, draw one out like this. Bam, just like that. Make sure everything lines up really nicely. Round out the corners quite a bit. Maybe I'll turn off the fill, or I'll keep the fill on. I'll keep it at whatever this background color is, right? Then I'll change the border, just like that, very subtle. This will be the off state essentially. And then in the center, let me zoom in a little bit more. I'm gonna create an ellipse. So I'll press the E key to create an ellipse, just like that. Make sure it's nice and centered. Use my eyedropper to grab that gray. That looks pretty good. So that's the off switch. Now what's really cool is you can have components within components within components with all different states, right? So we've got this switch here inside of this component. Now I can turn this into a component. So I've got these two elements selected. Command and Control K to turn it into a component. Boop, there we go. And now I can also create an on state. So I'm going to press the plus button, new state. This will be on. I'll grab this little guy, move it over to the right, grab the background, hop into my assets. Maybe this will be the highlight color for the pink, right? Change this color to white. Bam, there we go. And now we've got our default state and we've got our on state. And what's cool is that because this is the master component, we can dive in and prototype this specific switch. And that way, all the different switches that we eventually have on our document will all be wired up automatically. So if I go into prototype mode, and what I basically want a user to do is I want them to tap on this switch to activate it. So instead of dragging this handle to another artboard, I can simply click on it, and that'll give us this little cute wire, and we can start defining our interaction over to the right. So I do want to tap trigger. Let me zoom in here a little bit. But I want the action to be auto animate because I want that little switch to kind of fly over to the right. So I'm going to do that, choose the destination, which is the on state. And I can choose, let's say, in and out, and let's go for 0.2 seconds so it's a nice quick switch. I can also go to the on state and do the exact same thing, just choosing our default state. There we go. So if I press play, we've got our switch, we can turn it on, we can turn it off, you get the idea, right? But what's nice is that, hey Michelle, and hey John Eric says, Howard Boopsky, indeed. What's cool now is that I can also use this switch multiple times, but I can also include it in a repeat grid. So what I can do is, let's say I can choose the text layer here, hold down Shift, choose my switch, Command and Control R to turn it into a repeat grid, boop, and then I'll drag, let's say 3 more down. And I can dive in here. This might be the on, off. You get the idea, right? You can change it as you wish. So this could be explicit for the filter, and this might be activity, and maybe we'll do, you know what? Maybe we'll just do 3. There we go. Perfect. So now that we've got our switch within our repeat grid, if we press play, we can turn them on in no particular order. We can turn them off, and there we go. And they all behave as you would expect. But going back to what we were doing earlier, we were creating this drop down, right? With these settings within this profile. So we've got these switch components with states nested inside this profile drop down. So what we need to do now, let me just go ahead and move this up into place. This isn't the prettiest thing in the world, but you know, you get it, you get the idea. There we go. So we've got this drop down set up. But of course, we now need to wire this one up. So if we go back a little bit, I'm just pressing my escape key, and we've got our default state and we've got our expanded state. But we want a user to be able to tap on that profile to reveal it. So I'm going to go to my default state, and Ben is asking, can you also create that drop down not in the component right away and then copy and paste it in the component state? Yes, absolutely you can. You don't have to do it all at the same time. You can bring components into other components. You can create the states later on if you wanted to. And as long as you edit the master component, it's basically going to populate throughout all the others. So there's a lot of flexibility involved in that. So we've got our default state active. I'm going to go into prototype mode, click on it just like we did before. I do want tap. I don't need auto animate for this case because I just want that drop down to appear. So I'm going to choose transition. I'm going to choose the expanded state, and I'll just have, let's say, oops, transition, expanded, no animation because I just want it to appear. Go to the expanded state. I might want to click on that again, right? Choose the destination default state, and that's really all you have to do. Now if I press play, watch this. I can tap, let me zoom in here just a little bit. I can tap on this profile icon, this lovely bearded man, tap on that, it expands. Then I can also interact with these switches. I can tap on it again to hide it. I can tap on it again, and you're noticing the states of those switches maintain their properties, which is super cool. So there's a lot you can do with components and nested states and a lot of different things. You know, the sky's the limit. And of course, we're going to be expanding on states and components in 2020 and beyond. So definitely stay tuned for that. And looks like we're just about out of time. Wow, that went by very quickly. So let me hop back over to me. There's me. Thanks for joining me, everyone, for my first Adobe XD Masterclass. Again, we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into some of the functionality of XD and many of the features, including states and components, design systems, linked assets, auto animate, masking, a lot of different things going forward. And after, I think next week will probably be another half an hour masterclass, but after that we might go to an hour when we do have a little bit more time. So stick around for that. Make sure to follow me on all the things. That way you can keep up to date. I've got my, what is it, right over here. We've got Dribble and Twitter as well. And that'll just about do it. So Kiki says it would be nice if automatically filled the prototype settings to the second item you've selected. That would be kind of cool. So yeah, the team is looking at a lot of different things to make the states and prototyping experience quite a bit better. So definitely, suggest that to the team over at adobeXD.uservoice.com. But that's going to do it for me for today. Anna and Tim and Nola and Jack and Kiki and Ricardo and Ben and Michelle and Steven and Johnny and everyone else joining me. Thank you so much. This was a fun day of masterclasses and Adobe XD daily challenges. I will see you all very soon. See you later.